So you consider yourself a strong, independent woman who believes she deserves the same legal rights and freedoms as men, yeah? Well, of course you do, because it's the 21st century, right? But do you know how much your life would have sucked if you had been born during ancient Roman times? If not, then you're in for an awful surprise, sweetheart, because ancient Roman law treated women like they were children, literally, and oppressed them as if they were second-class citizens. Welcome back to Ancient Rome Revisited. I'm your host, Marcus Aurelius, and I'll have you know that I was considered to be one of the most skilled emperors in matters of law. So I think it's fair to say that I know what I'm talking about in this video. For that reason, join me as I walk you through 12 reasons why life absolutely sucked for women in ancient Rome. Before we begin, though, if you love Roman history and want to learn more about the trials and tribulations of the people and the Republic of Rome, then click the subscribe button now and you'll never miss another episode of Ancient Rome Revisited. If you have just clicked subscribe, then I, Marcus Aurelius, thank you. Okay. Let's look at how one of history's most advanced civilizations afforded women about as many rights as a piece of furniture, and sometimes even less legal protection than a slave. You might want to sit down for this one, sister. The social injustice that you're about to witness might well knock you sideways. 12. You were a perpetual child, legally speaking. Let me start with the foundation of female oppression in Rome. Patria potestas, literally meaning father's power. This wasn't just some dusty old law. This was the nuclear bomb of patriarchal control that lasted for over 1,000 years. Under this system, every Roman woman was considered a perpetual child in the eyes of the law. And I mean perpetual. She never aged out of this system. From the moment she was born until the day she died, she was under the legal control of a male guardian called a tutor. Initially, this was her father. If he died, it passed to her husband. If he died too, it went to her adult son. No husband or son. Congratulations. You got a male relative or even a family friend appointed by the state to control your life. This system was most rigid during the Republic and early Empire. The tutela mulierum system was finally abolished between 320 to 325 CE under Constantine. Though some reforms began earlier, Claudius abolished the tutorship of agnates, male relatives, for adult women, and the Augustan laws of 9 CE freed women with 3 children from guardianship. 11. You couldn't buy a loaf of bread without permission. The guardian system wasn't just about big decisions. It controlled every aspect of a woman's life, particularly for sui juris women, those not under their father's direct control, usually because he had died. This system, called tutela mulierum, was most restrictive during the Republic and early Empire, roughly from the 2nd century BCE to the 2nd century CE. The guardian had to endorse major legal and financial transactions, requiring his authorization if a woman was drawing up a will, manumitting a slave, contracting an obligation, or taking part in formal legal acts. Notably, the guardian's consent was required if a woman wished to alienate real estate in Italy, and the workforce used to cultivate it, the most valuable property in Roman society. However, it's important to note that this didn't literally mean permission for buying bread. Women could make small daily purchases, but any significant transaction, any legal contract, any attempt to free slaves, or any formal legal proceeding required male approval. You were basically a human storage unit with limited access to your own contents, and this system was most rigid during the height of Roman power. 10. The government mandated. When you had to get married in 18 BCE, Emperor Augustus passed what I like to call the marriage police laws, officially known as the Lex Julia de Maritandis Ordinibus, the Julian law on the ordering of marriage. Augustus required all citizens to marry, with men between ages 25 to 60 and women between ages 20 to 50 being mandated to wed. But Augustus didn't just want people married, he wanted them breeding like rabbits. The law included brutal penalties for anyone who dared to remain single or childless. Unmarried people couldn't inherit property from anyone except close relatives. Childless couples could only inherit half of what they were left in wills. It was basically a tax on not having kids. Imagine if the IRS could fine you for not getting pregnant. 9. You had 6 months to find a new husband after divorce. The Lex Papia Poppaea of 9 CE supplemented Augustus's marriage laws, making them even more restrictive. Women were given just 6 months to remarry after a divorce, and only 2 years after their husband's death. Meanwhile, men faced no such time pressure and could remarry whenever they pleased. Imagine being a widow, still grieving, and having government officials knocking on your door, asking when you're going to find husband number 2. And if you were divorced, you usually had to return to your father's house, assuming he was still alive and willing to take her back. If not, you were essentially homeless, because you couldn't legally rent or buy property on your own. 8. Adultery laws that only applied to you. In 17 BCE, Augustus passed the Lex Julia de Adulteriis Coascendis, the Julian law on restraining adultery. And this is where Roman misogyny really went into overdrive. Under Roman law, adultery was determined entirely by the status of the woman. If a married woman had sex with any man besides her husband, she was guilty of adultery. However, if a married man had sex with a woman who was not or could not be legally married, there was no offense. Roman men could sleep with prostitutes, slaves, actresses, and basically any unmarried woman they wanted, and it was perfectly legal. But if a Roman wife so much as looked at another man the wrong way, she could be charged with a capital crime. 7. Your own father had to prosecute you for adultery. Here's the really twisted part about the adultery laws. A woman's father was actually required to prosecute his own daughter for adultery. If he refused, her husband could do it. If the husband refused, any random citizen could bring charges against her. It was like having a legal system designed by the world's worst reality TV producer. The punishment: the woman would be exiled to a barren island, lose half her dowry, and be forbidden from ever remarrying. The man she committed adultery with got the same punishment, but her husband, who might have been cheating on her with half the slave population, he got nothing, because that wasn't considered adultery. 6. Your husband could divorce you for any reason. Divorce in Rome was actually relatively easy to obtain for men. A Roman man could divorce his wife by simply declaring, "I divorce you," dimitto te, in front of witnesses. No court, no paperwork, no questions asked. He could divorce her for being infertile, for not producing male heirs, or honestly, for any reason he felt like. Women, on the other hand, had virtually no grounds for divorce, and certainly couldn't initiate it on their own. They were trapped in marriages, regardless of how awful their husbands were, while men could discard wives like old sandals. 5. You couldn't control your own wealth. Roman women could technically own property, but it was like being given a sports car with no keys. While women could inherit property from their fathers, everything was managed by their male guardians. They couldn't sell it, couldn't use it as collateral, couldn't make any decisions about it. They were basically human storage units for family wealth. The only tiny exception was the ius trium liberorum, right of 3 children. If a freeborn woman had 3 children, or a freed woman had 4, she could be released from guardianship. But even this freedom was limited. She still couldn't represent herself in court or hold public office. In order to gain basic human rights, a Roman woman had to risk her life in childbirth at least 3 times. 4. The government regulated your jewelry and clothes. In 215 BCE, during the Second Punic War, the Roman Senate passed the Lex Oppia, Oppian law, which restricted women's clothing and jewelry. Women couldn't wear more than half an ounce of gold, couldn't wear multicolored clothes, and couldn't ride in carriages within the city limits unless they were attending religious ceremonies. This law was supposed to be temporary, a wartime austerity measure. But like most temporary government restrictions, it stuck around long after the war ended. It wasn't repealed until 1950 BCE, 20 years later, and only after Roman women staged what was essentially ancient Rome's first feminist protest, filling the streets and confronting senators at their homes. 3. How escaping male control could get you buried alive. There was exactly one way for a Roman woman to escape the guardian system: become a Vestal Virgin. These priestesses were the only women in Rome who could own property, make wills, and represent themselves in legal matters. But here's the catch. They had to take a vow of celibacy for 30 years. If they broke this vow, they were buried alive, and I mean literally buried alive, in an underground chamber, because killing a Vestal Virgin directly would anger the gods. So Roman women had a choice: spend your entire life under male control or become a celibate priestess, with the constant threat of being buried alive hanging over your head. 2. You couldn't represent yourself. In court, Roman women were completely barred from legal representation. They couldn't serve as lawyers, couldn't represent themselves in court, and couldn't even testify in most cases without their guardian's permission. If someone wronged you, stole from you, or harmed you, you had to rely on a man to seek justice on your behalf, and only if he felt like it. This meant that women had essentially no legal recourse for abuse, theft, or any other crimes committed against them. They were legally invisible, existing only through the men who controlled them. 1. The system was designed to last forever. The most depressing thing about all of these restrictions: they were built to last. The Patria Potestas system remained largely intact for over 1,000 years. Some of these laws persisted in various forms until Christianity became the dominant religion, and even then, the emphasis shifted from forced marriage to encouraged celibacy, which wasn't exactly an improvement for women who wanted to make their own choices. The Roman legal system was so influential that many of its concepts about women's legal status persisted in European law well into the 19th and 20th centuries. Some American states didn't fully grant women property rights until the 1960s and 70s, meaning some of these Roman-era restrictions on women's legal autonomy survived for over 2 millennia. Why this injustice still matters today. Looking back at Roman women's lives isn't just an exercise in historical curiosity. It's a stark reminder of how legal systems can systematically oppress half the population while maintaining the illusion of civilization and progress. Rome gave us roads, aqueducts, and legal concepts we still use today. But it also gave us over 1,000 years of proof that you can build magnificent buildings and write beautiful poetry while treating women like property. So the next time someone romanticizes ancient Rome or talks about the good old days. Remember that for half the population, those days involved a lifetime of legal imprisonment, forced marriage, and systematic oppression, all wrapped up in the beautiful marble facade of one of history's most celebrated civilizations. The story of Roman women is ultimately the story of human potential, crushed by legal systems designed to maintain power structures. These women weren't lacking in intelligence, capability, or ambition. They were trapped in a legal maze designed to ensure they could never find the exit. And those, my friends, are the 12 reasons why life truly sucked for women in ancient Rome. If you found this video somewhat enlightening, or indeed shocking, then please subscribe and you'll never miss another episode of Ancient Rome Revisited. I look forward to seeing you in the next video.